I wanted to do a video about the topic about snakes. Don't fear, respect. And I think a lot of people, they think of that in a very narrow way. But it occurred to me that there are still many people who keep snakes who, I guess, make a lot of assumptions about them, and also specific species. They look at them and, they sort of draw parameters around them. And I think that's selling them short. A lot of these snakes are a lot more intelligent than we give them credit for, and this is something that Native Americans have known for many generations. That's why you often hear people talk about snakes as their brother, because that's the kind of respect and honor that the Native Americans gave to snakes. It's very different than the, I guess, the white Anglo-Saxon American type view of animals. Much more in terms of, sort of an intuitive relationship between humans and other animals. And I have run across a lot of, I guess, a lot of groups and things like that where people just come across as very rigid in their view of these snakes, and especially ball pythons. I think ball pythons unfairly have a reputation for being boring and not having much upstairs, and just sort of being, being there to look pretty. And I think they're a lot more than that. I started to find out more and more about this once I got my snake Velvet, and really started to get to know her as an individual. And I think that has helped me tremendously. I learned to read her behavior and kind of, as much as a human can, get inside her head. But I think we have to remember that because we communicate differently than snakes do, and we have a different brain orientation. And I'm not saying that we're necessarily higher than snakes are. I don't really believe that. I think we're just different. But I think we never can really fully know what these snakes are experiencing from the inside out. We can only guess. And I think more and more research is being done on the behavior of snakes, and so we can see a little bit more of what they're capable of. And I think some of the videos that people are beginning to make now, some of the people that are really thinking outside the box, like One Soft Kiss, Carla, who's one of the ones that I watch pretty regularly. I think she really, if anybody could be called the snake whisperer, I think it's her. And I actually caught some flack for saying that in one of the groups, but I didn't care, because I think that she looks deeper. And there are other people too that are starting to make videos along the same lines. She looks deeper, and a lot of these people are starting to realize that snakes have more going on upstairs than people once realized, and that they do have the capability to bond. They have the capability to know who their handler is, and to to have some sort of attachment. I mean, there's no way to know exactly how they experience that. They may view it differently than we view it towards them. But at the same time, I think we can't discount the possibility that there may be a whole lot more that we don't know about these snakes than what we do know. And we shouldn't assume that all they're capable of is eating and pooping and breeding, that they may actually have a rich inner life going on inside their own heads that we know nothing about. And I think it's very important for us to keep an open mind and to continue to watch them and study them and try to communicate with them even, because I think that when it really comes right down to it, it's really not that different from people of different nationalities. That people of different nationalities have different customs, they have different languages, they have different dialects. They interpret things that other people do in different ways. For instance, there may be certain gestures in the American culture that are considered, positive type gestures, whereas in another culture they might be taken as an insult. And I think, just like those types of differences among people of different nationalities, animals also have their own language and their own interpretations and their own ways of seeing the world. But I think it makes a lot of sense for us to go in with an open mind when we approach these reptiles and really try to understand, how they're experiencing things from their side, and try to communicate with them. I think that is probably the best thing that we can do to take the best care of them that we can. Because if we understand them more than we did before, then that information is powerful and it will help us to give them better care. And so I think if any of you watching this video make videos of your own, I would really encourage you to do videos on this topic. Maybe try to bring along some of the more rigid thinking people in the hobby so that they can, maybe start to question some of their biases. And I think it is a bias. There are a lot of people that still cling to somewhat outdated information about snakes and, their mentality and their abilities and that kind of thing. But I think that, we should never stop learning, and we should always look at them as, important and valuable beings. I came across a video, this was maybe, 2 months ago, something like this, in which a young man had a baby ball python, and he was having trouble getting it to eat, and it was going to the bathroom on him and peeing and pooping, pretty much randomly, which is common for babies. It seems to me that it takes a while before they even have, just like with other animals, before they have a little more control over when they go to the bathroom. So this made him very irritated, and he decided he was going to just dump it somewhere. he dumped it in one of the parks in North Carolina called the Greenways. I think the one that was identified in the video, a few people looked at it and said they thought it was Higgins Greenway. But this really bothered me when I saw this. I thought, you know, how can somebody take in an animal like this and then simply because it won't eat or it goes to the bathroom on him or something like this, he just considers it completely worthless and worthy of just being dumped like garbage. And so I contacted some people and got involved and made it my business to try to get a search effort together to find this snake, and also to make sure that this man was prosecuted, because it is against the law to dump a non-native animal like that in the woods. And this kind of, you know, developed into an investigation. Eventually, there was an officer assigned to it, an animal control officer. But the interesting thing is that the police department, outside of that, you know, they had this conception that, oh well, it's just a snake. If it were a dog or a cat, and you hear this in, you know, in the man who did his video, he eventually took them down, but they were saved for the authorities. You hear the same type of prejudice in the man's view of the snake. You know, he minimized the importance of its life by saying, oh, it's just a snake. If it were a dog or a cat, well, maybe I wouldn't do that, but, you know, it's a snake. Who cares? And that is exactly the type of thinking that prevents people from honoring these snakes the way they should and really respecting them. And I think a part of respect for these snakes is not only not to do those types of acts, not just dump them when they get inconvenient, but if you see somebody doing this, say something. Speak up. Don't feel that it's none of your business and that you shouldn't get involved. Just like if it were a child. Think about if it were a child, you know, of course, most people would probably want to get involved, in at least nowadays. I know in the old days people didn't do that either, but now I think it's considered more socially acceptable. But, you know, I think that there are too many instances where snakes are just not given the respect that other domesticated animals are given. And I think really we can now consider snakes, the snakes that are, you know, marketed in the pet trade, at least, domesticated animals. I think at this point they've been captive bred for a number of generations, especially ball pythons. So I think that as their caretakers, we have a duty to stand up when we see something happen like this. I mean, this man brashly bragged about this and breaking a former ball python's ribs for not eating, and burning a rat, and, you know, it just went on and on and on, the abuses that he had done to animals that were in his care. And I was really surprised that it took as long as it did for people to start reporting it. I know I reported it immediately when it came to my attention. I reported it to several regulatory agencies, and it took a while for them to figure out who in North Carolina had jurisdiction over that type of thing, because the state legislature had recently kind of divested itself. I think the Fish and Wildlife department that normally would, would have jurisdiction. They changed the name of it. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I did all this research to try to figure out, who it was that, that was responsible for these types of situations and investigating and all that. But yeah, a few years ago, the state legislature divested itself of that responsibility within, I guess, within the Environmental Protection Division. They changed the name to something else, and so they no longer have jurisdiction over that, whereas other states still do. Because it is an environmental issue, because, if somebody is dumping a snake that originated from Africa and is built to live in a tropical climate in a non-tropical area, then clearly that's an environmental issue. But I think because of various political reasons, North Carolina decided to divest itself of that, and so it fell on basically animal control to be the ones to investigate incidents like this. And so myself and several other people got together and were working with the animal control officer who was assigned, who is really wonderful, but she was sort of working at a disadvantage because of the fact that a lot of people, even within her department, had the same mindset. Oh, well, it's just a snake. And, people need to get that idea out of their heads. It's not just a snake. It's a living animal that has some sort of feelings. I mean, whether they're human feelings or something completely different from that, we don't know. But we know that they experience pain. We know that they can experience fear. We know that they have discomfort when they're not being well taken care of, or when they're in an environment that's not optimum for them. But I think this is the type of thing that we're up against in this hobby. The rest of the world still hasn't come around to seeing snakes in the same way as they see a dog or a cat. But I think it would be really great if we could get society to view them in the same way that Native American societies view them, like our brother, like our sibling. These snakes, they're entrusted to us, and, we should value them the same way as we do a sibling. And if we keep that in our mind, if we keep that, every step of the way while we work with them, I think that it will impact upon our hearts, and we'll be able to impact that upon other people's hearts, and really show the way that they should be regarded in society, that they should be taken in with love and caring and all of the respect that's afforded to other animals and even humans. Because anything less than that is selling them short. I think they are wonderful animals with untapped potential, and it's just amazing every day. Every day that I watch them, watching my own snake and also watching other people's snakes on video, there's clearly more going on in there than we realize. And I think we need to widen our view of what they are and who they are. So I just wanted to do a video on this topic, and because I thought it was really important. People talk about don't fear, respect, but they talk about it in a very narrow sense, and I wanted to get deeper than that and go into some of the biases that are still commonly held, I mean, even within our hobby. And hopefully, over time, those of us who see a little deeper into these animals and how wonderful and how complex they really are, maybe we can share this philosophy and this mindset with others who are still stuck in the the very rigid types of views of them. And I encourage you to spread the word, because there's just so much to these animals, and if you really take the time to get to know them and form a relationship with each one, and really listen to them, then that will make us better keepers in the long run.